Excellent. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good night, everybody. It's good to welcome you all. I'll be moderating this evening's conversation. My name is Marcos. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I want to just begin by acknowledging the indigenous land that we all find ourselves on. I'm imagining we all find ourselves in many different places. So just would like to take a quick moment to ground us in a moment of prayer, honoring the land that we inhabit and those whose land that we are inhabiting. So just take a quick moment of silence to acknowledge the indigenous communities. I greet you from Chicago, where we honor the Council of the Three Fires with the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Odawa tribes. And we thank you for the opportunity to gather in conversation. We apologize for the technical difficulties, and I think in good old IFTJ fashion, the community still shows up. So thank you for being here. For the sake of time, want to just maybe give our panelists a quick moment, like a minute, to introduce themselves and where they're coming from. So I'll just kind of follow down the list, and then if folks just want to introduce themselves. So I'll go with Christian. You're the first on my screen.
Christian Sanders, the Assistant Director of Diversity Inclusion, as well as the Director of the Reaching Models program at St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland, where I'm a 2010 alumnus. I am also alumnus of the, why can't I remember the name of this here now? Of the, Carlos, what did we just complete?
Oh, the seminar.
The seminars, Ignatian Spirituality. As well as I am currently pursuing my master's in educational leadership at the University of Dayton. I'm a Meredith College alum. And then I have a certificate in diversity management from Cornell University.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christian. Will?
Hi, everybody. It's good to be with you. I am coming from Brophy College Prep in Phoenix, Arizona. Pronouns are he, his, him. I serve as the Director of Justice Formation and Advocacy here on campus. And then I'll also sit on the steering committee for our Equity and Inclusion Committee. We're currently in the process of developing a strategic plan for anti-racism right now that I'm also a part of, along with Jonathan, who's also on the call. Yeah, and I am a graduate of Brophy, also a graduate of Creighton, also a graduate of University of San Francisco. So Jesuits all around.
Thanks, Will. Kitty?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kitty Hooper, and I am the Diversity Coordinator at St. Ignatius College Prep in Chicago. I'm also a 1987 graduate of St. Ignatius. I didn't go to a Jesuit college. I went to an HBCU, Spelman College. And I have, my degree was in chemistry, and my graduate degree is in African-American Studies from UIC. So, and I've been at Ignatius for 21 years. I've been in the diversity position for 11.
Thank you, Kitty. Carlos?
Hello, everyone. Carlos Jimenez, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion from Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose, California. I'm a graduate of Bellarmine from the class of '02 and graduate of Santa Clara University, and now a student in USF, the PhD program. So also Jesuit, and I went to the Jesuit school in my hometown in Guadalajara in Mexico. So Jesuit all around, Jesuit educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Jonathan?
Hi, everyone. Jonathan Londonio, he, him, his. Also at Brophy Prep in Phoenix, where I was born and raised, the son of Colombian immigrants. I am the Equity and Inclusion Coordinator at Brophy. Like Christian, also 2010, the Men of 10, as we said at Brophy. And on campus, the first thing that we did, I'm gonna ramble, so I'm gonna stop myself, but I help students with equity issues, access issues, families with that. My degrees are in transborder studies and Latino community development, and currently also studying at University of San Francisco.
Jamal?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jamal Adams. I am the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Loyola High School of Los Angeles, where I am a proud alum, class of 1990. I guess I broke out of the Jesuits for a second. I went to Columbia, got my degree in econ and worked in finance for almost 12 years before I grew up and have a real job. I returned to Loyola in my role, as I said, Director of Equity and Inclusion, also teach African American Studies at econ. I'm the basketball coach, Director of Faculty. I did go back and get my master's from LMU in education. This group of folks really has become my family, particularly in 2020, and I'm excited to be part of this roundtable tonight.
Thank you, Jamal. Jordan?
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Jordan Brown. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion in Sacramento, California. Jesuit, Sacramento, California. I went there from 2000 to 2004, and it's really dope to be back. And yeah, I'm a traveler, creator. I help the students, see the potential in themselves and being able to just be on campus is really dope. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'll share some more later on.
Thank you, Jordan. Bernie?
Yes, my name is Bernie Bowers. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Loyola Blakefield in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been at, I'm a graduate, I'm of 1978 of Loyola. I've been back at Loyola for the past 16 years in this position. I have a degree in communications with a minor in education from the University of Maryland, just looking forward to the panel and love seeing the folks that are in this group. It's been a very tight-knit group over the COVID season. So thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. And last but not least, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Henderson. I'm the Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Director at Bellarmine Prep in Tacoma. 1977 graduate of Bellarmine, and I also went to Seattle University. Glad to be here tonight.
Wonderful. And again, thank you to just all of our panelists and Carlos in particular who helped coordinate tonight's session. So our format is going to go, I'll ask a series of questions to different panelists, and then depending on if we have time, we'll get a chance to maybe break into some dialogue. But to begin us off, I'd love to ask Jamal, Bernie, and Will, how do you reconcile the affirming and painful aspects of your experiences as a student at a Jesuit school? Jamal, why don't you kick us off?
I didn't hear you. Is that me, Carlos? Am I starting off, Marcos? Okay.
Yeah, go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think right. My time at Loyola, I look back as very fondly. For background, I came to Loyola from a public school background. My father was just really adamant that he wanted me to get the best educational experience. While candidly at home, we had a fairly agnostic, probably like faith tradition. I would say the affirming part of my time at Loyola really was the faith piece. It really, the Jesuits, the Ignatian values, and the first time really to have formation was really, really powerful for me. And I think it's something that has drawn me back in my role. I would say the painful pieces were, mid 80s LA was a, hot and unbelievable time, particularly from a gang violence standpoint and a LAPD standpoint. And I would say that, oftentimes in class, I'd find myself one of few or one of one. And navigating those things for me, I think we only had one African-American faculty member at the time I went to Loyola, and I don't want to disparage him now, but he wasn't necessarily an advocate for us. And so really it was about banding together with my fellow peers. I had seniors that we had a spot on campus called Bro Row, very similar to what Beverly Tatum talks about. Like that's where we hung every recess, lunch, before and after school. And I would say that socialization really was like part of like my coping mechanism for all the various microaggressions and things like that would happen on campus. And so one of my reasons for coming back and really seeking out this role at Loyola was this idea of hopefully making our school and that experience for all of our kids, not just our kids of color, one that is more healthy, more relevant, and more inclusive.
That's good.
Thanks, Jamal.
I guess I can try to go next. I guess similar to Jamal, except I'm a little older than he is. So I was actually bused to my what was called not even middle school, was called junior high school back then. And I had the opportunity, I was an athlete. So in my 8th grade year, I had the opportunity of being able to go to Loyola and pursuing that. So that was kind of the affirming piece, as well as the group of brothers that I met throughout my process. Now, granted, I had a class of 144 and only 7 of us were African American. Well, I'll say 7.5. But it was that affirming. And I think we probably, as brothers, could have probably written the book, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit in this, in the cafeteria together. It was that was the affirming piece of being able to deal with that brotherhood and those guys. And it was really a great thing, because the older guys, and this is the things that we learned from my freshman year and as I grew into a senior, the older guys actually took care of the younger guys. And it was a very, very tight-knit group of individuals. Bad parts, I don't know. I mean, there were some, you still had folks on the other end that sometimes really didn't accept you. But at that point in time, Loyola, it was Loyola High School back then. It was more of a middle class type school. So kind of all semi-accepted, except, like you said, Jamal might have been the only one in the class. So everything that brought up was Black. I was supposedly the person that knew everything Black. So in that respect, that was kind of, a little bit disheartening until, which most of us felt good about, was Roots when it came out. So when Roots came out, we were good being Black. Other than that, you still had, like I said, that separation. But for the most part, as we grew through the whole class of 1978, all of the class became a lot closer as we grew older. And again, don't get it wrong, there were some that did not, adhere to that at all. But that was, it was a great philosophy of Jesuit education. And that's also one of the reasons I was able to come back when I was able to come back, because although the landscape changed, the teachers changed, the students changed, the philosophy of the Jesuit education from Loyola has never changed. So for me to be able to jump back into that and to be able to help the boys as they are coming along has been great.
Awesome. Thank you, Bernie. Will?
So I think from my perspective, when I think about like affirming or painful experiences, Brophy was built with me in mind as a white male. It was built and designed to kind of, for me to operate at kind of max capacity, so to speak, and max comfort. And so, it was a really comfortable place. It was a place where, I felt like I was represented, seen. And so I think the only real experience I can talk about in terms of that as a student was the way that we track, specifically with honors, AP, and things like that. And I think there's a clear distinction between kind of like who are the kids that can hack it and who are the kids that can't hack it. And really early on, you're told who can and can't hack it. And I was told that I couldn't hack it. And it's really interesting now because, I've taught AP and I tell my students like, yeah, I never took an AP course and I was never given the opportunity to take an AP course. So that's interesting. But I think, it's an interesting piece as a white grad coming from a white dominant institution to answer this question, especially about affirmation. I think where I experience a lot of pain right now is when I walk with students, as the justice coordinator, as the justice formation director, we're constantly asking our students to live lives of justice while they experience injustice on our campus. And it is deeply disturbing and challenging as I challenge them and push them to ask those questions and really examine their own lives. And then, they ask the question right back, then why am I being treated this way? And walking with them through that. I think there's a really, really big disassociation and just trauma that happens as, you're being gaslit through your experience as you're told to work for justice and simultaneously experiencing that. So yeah, it's a tension and a challenge. Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Thank you all. Our next question is going to go to Kitty and Jonathan. What brought you back to your institutions as faculty members? Maybe Kitty, if you don't want to launch us off.
Sure. So I always kind of think of it, I think all of us, I know probably all of us on this here are people of faith. And so I kind of describe it as my faith kind of grabbing me by the back of my collar and dragging me back. Because I resisted all the way. So it kind of started, I think, I always wanted to be a pediatrician. So my senior year, the principal at Ignatius, Father Schaefer, and I think until my senior year, there were no Black teachers. And then my senior year, there were two. My senior year, the principal into the senior year called me out of a Black student union meeting and said, hey, Kitty, we'd like you to consider going into education, and consider coming back to Ignatius to teach. And I was like, Father, I got to make more money than that. No, forget it. And he just, he kind of gave me that look like, okay, sure. All right, well, and so then he didn't say anything else. And then when I was 23, I got a call because one of the science teachers was going on maternity leave, and they asked me to come fill in because they knew I had a degree in chemistry. And so I went, and I filled in for a semester. And at that point, I did want to teach, but I wanted to teach at, a predominantly black school in the city of Chicago. And that was kind of my dream. And I was sitting in the classroom working on some papers, and three African-American girls came in, and they said, Ms. Hooper, we know you've talked to us a lot about wanting to work in a predominantly African-American school, but you went to Ignatius here, and you told us that there weren't any teachers of color. And I said, yes. And they said, well, we get what you want to do, but they just looked at me and they said, remember what that felt like. And even though we are and they didn't quite say it this way, but the point was saying, they said, even though we're academically privileged, we need you too, right? The students of color need you at Ignatius, need you too, even though we have academic advantages. And I listened and I said, all right, that's a good point. And then, fast forward. So, and then I left, so I was supposed to be there for a semester. And then 7 years later, I was asked to come speak at the African-American admitted students reception in the spring of 2000. And so I came back and I spoke. And the woman who was the assistant principal, she was the assistant principal when I was a student. And she said, thank you very much for doing this. I was like, yeah, of course, no problem. Well, then she called, right, in like July, so a few months later, and said, Kitty, we had a science teacher that just broke their contract, and we're in a spot here. We need you to come back and take this and interview for this position. And I was like, all right. And I was making a transition. And I was like, all right, well, I have to be offered a certain amount of money. I didn't say this, but I was like, well, they're not going to offer me the amount of money I need. So then, when they don't, I can just back out. Well, so I'm in the interview and, talking to the principal. They called a couple of hours later and said, yeah, we want to offer you this position. And they offered me like $5,000 beyond what I wanted. And so I said, all right, let me just listen to what my faith is saying. This path has been kind of, right, I have to stop ignoring the obvious. So that's basically what did it. And I haven't looked back since, and I've loved it ever since. So.
Thank you, Kitty. Jonathan?
Hi, everyone. I feel like I have so much to say here. So like I mentioned, I graduated in 2010, and I had a very positive experience at Brophy, especially in my last 2 years. The first 2 years was a difficult and rough transition from public school, but Brophy is an historically affluent school, historically and still predominantly white institution, and as such, has had a very good reputation, right, as kind of being an elite institution. And so for me, being at Brophy felt like, being in a golden castle of sorts. Like, if you saw the public or the restrooms at the public schools that I came from, and, walking in, I remember, like, even it's a strange example, but I remember walking into the bathrooms at Brophy thinking, like, this is crazy that this is a school. And so, being at Brophy, like, I enjoyed it. Like, I genuinely enjoyed my time there. And I had high school fun. Student life was great for me the last 2 years. So, and I stumbled across a skills-based work study job that gave me a scholarship at Arizona State to work with our football team doing video stuff. So I felt indebted to Brophy, forever grateful for helping me stumble across a non-academic, by the way, scholarship to college. And while I was in college studying Latino community development and immigration studies, I learned about Brophy opening up its Loyola Academy, which is its on-campus junior high for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, as well as it started the Padres Latinos Unidos de Brophy, a parent organization for Spanish-speaking parents. So I was just proud. I knew Brophy was a place where good was happening, and I had the opportunity to come back as a volunteer, an alumni volunteer, and I did that, and was able to get the position that I work in now, which is dealing directly with the Latino community, La Comunidad Latina, right, and Brophy. So it was just great to be able to do that and impact my own community at a community that also is mine, right? So it was a way of bolstering my own community, bolstering the experiences of the current students in a community that meant so much to me as a student. But as I have been working at Brophy, I quickly realized the ways that I was oppressed, and the ways that I was challenged in ways that I didn't really understand at the time when I was a student. Realizing that, no one ever talked to me about Latino identity until I got to college. And when I got to college, it's like it all clicked, right? In fact, I remember as a university student, I came back and spoke with alumni, because it's like everything I learned in college is like, these guys got to learn it. Like, these guys got to hear this, because I'm learning all these great things. And no one talked about these things to me when I was in high school. And I wasn't being represented in the classroom. Wasn't learning about anything that was relevant to my community, not reading anything from people from my community. It was, slim to none on that end. And as Will mentioned, quickly you learn who the academic students are and who the non-academic, gifted students are. And then, there's certain tracks, and very early on, I realized this is me, this is where I'm going to go. And I'm not that crowd, right? And so it's been a challenge to be back, but it's also been a blessing to be back, to continue the good that is happening, but also help push Brophy forward into a new phase, right? A new existence with the diversity that we have, the talent that we have, and the knowledge that we have. So that's what brought me back. That's why I'm still here and still going. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Kitty. Kitty, you kind of touched on this. I'd like to ask the next question to Jordan and Barbara. What do your classmates perceive of the work that you do now? Go ahead, Jordan. Looks like you're ready.
Well, I think it's interesting. I get a lot of mixture because like some people are surprised that I'm back, but then they're also appreciative at the same time, right? They're just like, oh, wow, you went back there? You know, and I'm talking to like most Black alumni, honestly, and they're just like, oh, I would never consider myself going back. I just didn't have that great of a time. And it's just interesting to hear them say that. And I kind of had that in a way. I had a different experience. I didn't finish school there. So I got expelled like last minute. So I kind of had this little chip on my shoulder, but like going back, people are surprised. They're also like, they're appreciative, just saying like, wow, that's great work that you're doing. It's cool to give them updates about what's happening on campus. You know, they want to know who's teaching there, who's a part of the program. And I always tell them, when I tell them about the work, it's always positive, right? They're really looking forward to hear what comes from that, because they wish that there was more that would have been done when they were going there, especially as a Black student or a student of color, in terms of just being able to deal with identity and being able to talk about these issues that they're facing amongst the students. And so, I mean, that was really motivates me, just to be that opportunity for them to go beyond what they experience, like to say like, hey, this is what we're doing here, to imagine something new. So yeah, it's a really good, I'm loving it. So being able to tell people what I do, especially my classmates.
My situation is very different because I'm 61. So I graduated in 1977. So think about that context. So first of all, I'm not even in touch with some of those people. I think the perception that I receive is a good thing. They're happy to hear that Bellarmine has made a commitment to have an equity person and to do that kind of work. That's the main thing I hear. I also think just like where we've come from where we were, I think that's the main thing that people are seeing. The African-American perception is that, wow, we've come a long ways from having, I think, 10 to 17 African-American students in the entire school, when we went to now having over 40% students of color and over 80 African-American students. That's just huge for them. And then just embracing this new iteration of, this 2020 version of what we're doing around making sure that students have what they need, and inclusion, including them in leadership, and the number in AP and honors classes has increased, things like that. So I think they're really happy to see how this looks now.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. You know, a big thing at a lot of our schools is tradition, right? And our Jesuit schools like to really ground themselves in that and the heritage that we have. So this question is for Carlos, Will, and Christian. How do you balance the weight of tradition while at the same time devoting your efforts to creating institutional change that's focused on equity and inclusion, of which is oftentimes not a part of the tradition of our schools?
I'll go real quick. At Bellarmine, which was founded in 1851. So it's almost as old as the state of California. So tradition feels it's very strong, right? We're tied to Santa Clara University at some point, then we separated. Then, you walk through, even though our buildings have changed a lot, there's still like this weight of history often in our you walk through the halls and there's pictures of the graduating class of 1919 or 1920 something, and you look at the pictures and you're like, wow, okay. So there's reaffirming parts of that in terms of saying like, okay, I'm part of something big, right? I'm part of something that is old and it's maintained itself all these years. But at the same time, when you talk about the work that we do, it is going against that, right? Because our schools, as Will said and some other folks have said, were not made for people of color. 1890, when the Chinese Exclusion Act was going on in the country, like when did we admit our first Chinese student, and when did we, all these questions that, as in a way, I'm glad that the Jesuits, despite all of the challenges, the historical challenges they have, sometimes they've been in their own way pushing, right? So yeah, and I think nowadays sometimes it's particularly from alumni, And sometimes faculty members have been at the school for 40 years or something, you know. That's sometimes when you get some of the pushback. But, you know, what's been invigorating for me, and then maybe a lot of my colleagues here, is like after the last, you know, what's happened in the last 7 months or so, all of a sudden people are like, yeah, okay, great, you know, keep doing what you're, you know, when maybe before there was a little more like hesitancy. So so it's a struggle, it's real, but again, really motivated by the fact that, you know, what we're doing is so mission oriented. So whenever that's part of our tradition, to fight for justice and equity, you know, even though some people might see it differently, we're gonna point back to our origins. So it is a challenge, but we make it work.
I'd like to piggyback Carlos there if possible. Particularly when you talk about history, I try to be a historian when I think about St. Ignatius High School, Cleveland. So late 1800s, you know, the Jesuits come to Cleveland, decide that they want to do a school, particularly looking at German and Irish immigrants. And during that time period, highly persecuted persons, and the area where we're built, there's a part of town called Irishtown Bend, which now is actually a pretty popular homeless destination, but it's also looking at being redeveloped for like a metro park for the area. But when you think about the population, then you're looking at persecuted persons who are, if you will, on the marginalized parts of society. And so you ask the question, how do we educate these persons? And so we've done a very good job at that, right? We're a very German, Irish, Italian, Catholic school when you look at our overall makeup. But then in 1930, we did something no other Jesuit school in the country had did. We admitted the first African-American student into our class who went on to graduate in 1934, Mr. George Anthony Moore. And so in terms of when you're looking at the mission, and tradition is a gimmick unless it lines with a mission. And so when you look at the mission, our mission of our institution has to be countercultural and look at educating those on the margins, if you will. And so as an institution, for me, it's not mission, it's a gimmick unless it's, it's not tradition, it's a gimmick unless it's rooted in the mission. And so when I look at St. Ignatius High School and being kind of countercultural to what the societal norms are or the status quo, I see it as an institution that's been able to do this work in that fashion since its inception. And although it may be misconstrued by some because they've been able to thrive in the dominant culture, the mission of the institution is to value, appreciate, and uplift matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that allows me the ability to serve in the capacity that I do. And I love what I'm able to do in terms of introducing students who come from socioeconomic, academically, and very other disadvantaged backgrounds to be able to be introduced to this school, loved by the school, embraced by the school, and most importantly, begin to see themselves as a part of the fabric. That was very instrumental in me and in my experience, and one of the reasons why I wanted to come back. I'll digress. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Christian. Well,
I think it's really, really important as faith institutions to really remind ourselves that tradition for tradition's sake is idolatry. And that has to be at the center of the way that we walk into this work, that we walk into any of our work, frankly. And I think here the charism of the Jesuits and Ignatian spirituality is just ripe for this work. Ignatian detachment, I think, is really going to be the key to helping people get past fragility, helping people get past lack of imagination, helping people get past kind of this holding on to things that feel secure, safe, comfortable, and inviting them into something new and different. And I think that's really what this, for me, right? Like it's so hard to hear, and I experience it similarly, like when Carlos was talking about how folks kind of identify this work as antithetical to the mission or an opposition to the mission or an opposition even to like our schools. That is like the most dangerous, I think one of the most dangerous things that we can we can consider and even think. And so much of this is about reimagining how this is integral to the mission. It's at the center of our mission. It's at the core of how we build community together, which is, another Catholic principle of Catholic schools, right? Like we do community so well. It's like, well, then like we should be really critical in the way that we build community. And we really need to think really, really pointedly about what it looks like to build inclusion and not just be, diverse institutions for diversity's sake, right? Like let's explore our diversity and really ask the hard questions that it presents, rather than, get people through the door and then be like, yeah, we're good. Like we don't have to talk about this. We don't have to talk about our different experiences. We don't have to talk about the social realities that we each experience and come from and different. And that's hard. Like that's really scary. It's really difficult, but like we can't reap the benefits of diversity unless we do that, right? Like unless we go there and we make space for all of our students, all of our adults, all of our faculty members, the time, the space, the capacity, and the skills and the tools to explore that together.
Yeah, thank you all for that. Really profound. And I even want to correct myself. I said that, tradition, that it hasn't been a part of it, but I think it's unlearning that component, right? That this is so central to the mission of our schools, right? But the ways in which our experience of moving through Jesuit education is such that these two are dichotomous. And I think that's part of the work that we have to do, is to, bring them together. So thank you all. It was just really profound and deep. I just want to identify that we have about 10 more minutes, but we did get a chance. We did start late. So if folks are okay, we're going to go over just a little bit of time. I know that there's a debate that's happening at some point this evening, but I guarantee you, I can almost without a shadow of a doubt, there's going to be greater depth and greater sense of hope that you'll find here than what's on the television show. So I invite you to stay, but if you have to go, you can just log off when you need. But this next question is going to go to Jordan, Barbara, and Christian. How do you talk to your students now about your experience of when you were a student?
I don't mind kicking this off. So I had a pivotal experience, and I don't want to get heavy into my student experience and my personal journey. That's not the question, but overall, I didn't want to be at St. Ignatius High School. And a great moment for me right now is that I didn't want to be there until I really understood what the mission was. And I didn't understand what the mission was until I went to the 2006 Ignatian Family Teach-In in Fort Benning, Georgia. And from that moment on, my grades so much better. I really, really understood why God put me at that point, whether I knew it or not at that point, but now I know that's why God put me at the school. And so it's an honor and privilege to be here as a lot of the work that I do, because of how pivotal those moments were for me as a student. And so what I try to teach them is that this is your school. We can talk about my stuff, and you can look around the school and see different things that I might have been a part of. There's banners that stand from when we won a state championship and I was a part of the team with football. There's banners and plaques that stand from when I won various awards, and that's cool. But what do you want from this experience? What I did is irrelevant, because my experience taught me that there's no limitations to any student here, regardless of where you come from. I don't want to talk about the socioeconomics of my family, but we were not advantaged in any matter. And so it doesn't matter what the income was. It doesn't matter what your family's education level was. It doesn't matter if you came from public school, Catholic school, a charter school. It doesn't matter where your sexual orientation is. Whatever you want out of this experience, because of the experience I had, I know it can be true for you to have whatever you want from this experience. And so my thing is, what do you want? And so we can talk some things about the things that I did, and that was great, but that's history. And I want you to write your own history. And so let's talk about where you are, what you want, what you expect out of this experience. And then my job is to make sure that we have the resources to make that possible for you.
That's powerful. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. So I think Jamal said earlier that the one thing that happened with me, we went to church, but we kind of had an agnostic experience. So when I heard about Bellarmine, I came with another young friend from a public school, not knowing anything about really Catholicism, let alone a Jesuit education. But when they came around to talk about Bellarmine, they kept talking college prep, college prep. So they had me at college prep. I'm like, I'm going to college. So I was in, got accepted. And like I said, there was very few African-American students. However, I felt challenged and supported in many ways. Come from a single family household. I received a lot of financial aid, which helped me to have, the full experience there. And I was catapulted into college. I was so prepared and ready. And the faith part also began there. We had classes like personal moral values, where they talked about, what happens if you wrote your own eulogy, what would you say about your life? What would you give? They didn't use these words back then, but certainly becoming a person for others, seeing God in all things were certainly embedded in what we did there. I talk to students, I tell them about my experience, but I also say, you are a gifted, talented person, and Bellarmine is just going to enhance that. You have these gifts. We try to make sure that they are encouraged to be involved in leadership so that they can show those gifts and share them. Some students just started this organization called ORB, One Race Bellarmine, after some of the things that happened this spring. And they are basically, it's a multicultural group of students who just on their own wanted to do this so that they can have unity at our school, and also talk about anti-racism and help students understand some of the vocabulary. And then also when I talk with them, because they're in that work now, they're in this work, I tell them that, this work is so complex and nuanced and layered to just hang in there with it. And then I think it was Will who said something about Ignatian spirituality, definitely having that, knowing that, people are gonna push back, but making sure that they're open as Jesuits, and in this Ignatian paradigm, that we make sure that we open our imaginations and confront fragility, which sometimes stops the work. So I tell them that you are amazing. At our BSU meeting today, when they started the meeting, they said, melanin, poppin', they're just so proud to be a part of Bellarmine. There's a large group of them who support each other, and it's just so nice to see that from the 1710 that I had when I was there. So it's a beautiful thing. I know that they love the school, but they're seeing that it's not perfect, and that's why they're there to help make sure that we can transform it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. That's nice. What I do when I talk to my students about, I guess, their experience, it's interesting. I just tell them to be themselves, right? I think that's the first thing, because I remember me being a student and being just tasked with trying to navigate identity, navigate the peer group, all that type of stuff. It was a really challenging moment. So I just tell them to be themselves, right? I see myself in them. I see my friends in so many of those students. So it's really dope to be able to witness that on the outside now as an adult. So I always remind them to be themselves. I definitely let them know that they're in a unique position, right, where they're at in the school, how there's so many opportunities that are presented to them, so many new ideas, whether it be service in the community where you can travel abroad, meeting new people, learning about just new ways of life, practicing new types of, I don't know, I guess just whether it be theater or choir or sports, just having that position to do these new things and feel comfortable. I think that's important. I also remind them that I didn't do as many things. And so I always want them to step outside their box, right? And just step outside their box and realize that they're paying for this experience, and some of them are. And so I just hey, let's really take advantage of this where you're at right now. This is a really great space. And then also last, I always tell them, don't underestimate the people that are around you or misjudge people, because I feel like since I've left and I'm seeing people that I went to school with and I'm seeing them in a different light in high school from, you know, as an adult from high school, and I'm like really surprised. And, you know, part back of my mind, I was like, damn, how did I treat that person when I was, you know, in high school, or how did they treat me? And so I always let them remind them that, like, this community that you're in, this Jesuit community, there's people who will always remember their experience. There's people who are really connected to the space. And if you don't feel like that now, you run into somebody later on, you will, and they'll remind you, and you'll want to be able to share those experiences and you know, be open to that. So always, you know, don't underestimate people that you went to school with, because, you know, people change, and definitely for the positive, yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, thank you all. That's beautiful and powerful, continuing to share this wisdom. So we're going to enter into our last question. And this question is going to be for Carlos, Jamal, and Kitty. And so despite the challenges that we face in this work, despite all of the uphill battles, what keeps you grounded and what keeps you going in this work? So maybe Kitty, if you don't mind leading us.
Sure. So, and I, you know, it's, you know, I think a lot of people would say the same thing, but it's mostly the kids for me. You know, they have so much energy, and, you know, when they come in, whether they come into your office and have a positive word, or they come into the office and they're upset, or they're hurt, or they're pissed off, I just want to do it for them, you know, and so, and it gets hard those days, but, you know, just their energy, their fears, wanting Ignatius to be a safe space for all of them, making, you know, sure that their culture and who they are is part of school culture and part of the fabric of the school. And as much as it's important for them, it's important for other kids that don't realize it, right? You know, so just, you know, just the kids and just, you know, their overall growth. And the other thing is, you know, it's the other DEI people across the Jesuit system, you know, and Carlos mentioned this the other day, and I don't want to take his thunder, but it's true. You know, it's just, you know, sometimes, you know, you bang your head on the desk like, God, this is not working, or I'm tired, or I'm frustrated, or, you know, I'm not doing it right. And then we get on these calls, and right, and it's just like, all right, you know, we talk to each other, and you're like, okay, I'm not alone in this. And so that keeps me grounded as well, because there's been many times when I just wanted to throw in the towel, and then we get together in some meeting or in person or on Zoom. So that's what does it for me. You know, it's the kids, and then my colleagues throughout the Jesuit system. It's just, man, you know, it's just both those groups are just, you know, in my life, you know, my heart, my beating heart in this. So that's what it is for me.
Thanks so much, Kitty. Carlos?
Okay, I'll go. Very similar. I think I also recognize the fact that Bellarmine gave me a lot, and it put me, Jesuit education put me in a trajectory that has led me to great satisfaction, great, you know, fulfillment. Yet I also see with that great gifts, I also recognize, and I'm critical of some of the aspects of where that education was lacking, or where that experience was affecting rather than affirming, or marginalizing rather than liberating. And I feel a responsibility that I'm there and I'm tasked with this opportunity, this, you know, for better or worse, I'm the, you know, so often as, you know, sometimes like, okay, diversity's, Carlos is doing inclusion and diversity, or Marcos or Jonathan, you know, and like, okay, yeah, it should all be, we got to change it so it's part of everyone's role in our community. But, you know, if I'm gonna be the person who's gonna be the face of it, or the one mainly pushing, then I wanna do a good job, because I want, by the time I leave, I wanted Bellarmine to be better, to be the type of school that I wish I would have attended. You know, even if my experience was great, I want it to be better. And as long as I can, as long as I last, I feel that commitment. I think it's my vocation. So that's what grounds me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carlos. And you started us, Jamal. You'll wrap us up. Thank you for.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think, you know, what echo Kitty and Carlos. I think obviously the kids, but I also say my colleagues, you know, being an alum, I think there are people that were instrumental in guiding me as a student that are still there or retiring now. And there's a lot of love there in wanting to, you know, support them in this new iteration or new context. I can't even begin to echo how grateful I am for our DEI space and the idea that we come together weekly, or the projects that we've worked on and what have you. It lifts me up. I brag about our group all the time. One of my colleagues on, Dr. Holmquist, she's probably tired of me talking about our DEI, our call this week, and I heard this or heard that, and I come jazzed and ideas, and I want to share. And then I'll say the third thing that I think is real for me, and I say this with all the humbleness I have in my heart, but I also recognize my great privilege. In a lot of ways, right? I'm an alum, I'm an athlete, I've had great accomplishments as a coach. And so because of that, I get invited into a lot of conversations at the highest levels of ISN and JSN. And true to that, I honestly feel, burden is not the right word, but I feel a responsibility, right, to represent our DEI folks. And I'll say this, I'm super proud that I really feel like we're being heard. You know, just the idea of this week in the professional development track within ISN, the idea that though our gathering in Chicago got canceled, and I remember Kitty and I talked like, we got to get together. This group needs to get together, and we are heard, and we're going to get together hopefully in June. The idea that DEI should be part of our sponsorship review process, that seems to be happening. I feel that responsibility, and I know that, you know, in a lot of ways, I'm invited to those spaces because of different accolades, like Chris was talking about, at my station as an African-American man and Jesuit in the Jesuit school network here in the country, and I'm always supported. Los and Marcos, you guys, Will's you know, there's just so many people in there I love. Jordan's energy, getting to know Bernie, Barbara, and I got to meet when I did my first sponsorship review about 4 years ago with Tacoma, getting to know Jonathan. Like, our community, forgive my colloquialism, but our community is really, really dope, and it's life-giving. And I would say what gets me going is that, and a lot of times I get to be the person to represent us in the spaces with the most important people in Jesuit education. And I take that responsibility really, really seriously.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you all. Just echoing what's been mentioned in the chat, what's been mentioned here, it's a humbling experience to be on this journey with you all. And I think the ways in which collectively I have seen the dial moving across the Jesuit Schools Network, across the assistancy, I think through the work that each of us, each of you have gotten to do within your institutions. I think there's a lot of power that we are building and sharing. And I think there's definitely a movement of the spirit here. You know, I think the ISN as well for, you know, creating space for conversations like this to be happening. And, you know, thank you to all of you who have joined this evening to be a part of this conversation, to continue this work, right? These conversations don't end here. And, you know, I wish that we could have more time so that we could hear from folks who are on this call and, you know, hear, because there's so much collective wisdom, and it's hard-earned wisdom, especially for those who were the pioneers in our schools, being some of the first in our schools. And so I just want to honor each of you for sharing the power of your story in our talk this evening. So one of the things that I'd like to just encourage folks, you know, through Swap Card, there's a way that you can kind of add contacts, and these are contacts we can have throughout Beyond. So if you heard something from someone tonight, you know, reach out to them individually, continue these relationships, because as was mentioned, I think the strength of what we have in the Ignatian family, I think, is part of what helps carry us in this work. So I highly encourage us all to continue remaining connected, because it's the kinship that I think is what we're trying to build within our schools and then within this wider Ignatian family. So with that, I don't know if there's anything else that is keeping us from what's happening on that TV screen, but be honest, I'll hang out here with you as long as I can.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you for doing this. Thank you, Carlos,
Yeah,
for putting this
thank you.
together.
Thanks for organizing, yeah. And Marcos,
Thank
thanks.
you, everyone. It's a
Marcos.
privilege
Yeah,
to be
Marcos,
with you.
appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you,
all.
Carlos.
Good
Thank
to
you,
see
Marcos.
everybody.